Hey everybody, welcome to the Chason Laing podcast. Amazing guests and interesting conversations, and I never really know where we're going to end up, but I can promise you we will have a good time getting there. Before we get started, do us a favor, hit the subscribe button and click the little notification bell to get access to these shows as soon as they drop. And if you don't mind sharing them on your social media, that would be amazing. And today we have a fantastic guest. He is an author and a musician and an indie film guy, a little bit of everything. So KRAFT, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, thank you, Jason. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Good, wonderful. I'm so glad that we got to connect. One of the reasons that I even started this whole podcast back when I started it in early January, I decided to start it in December, was I wanted to meet and get to know more people that were doing interesting things within my industry and also even outside the industry. And so you're one of the first ones that are, it's your connection that I've made basically from starting this podcast and from Facebook and things like that. And so this is kind of fun to actually get to move on into something great like this and see that, you know, the purpose of starting this thing is actually working. So the network is growing and I'm getting to know people. And for the audience, they might not know who you are. So why don't you give me just a little introduction to yourself? Obviously, I already kind of announced that you're an author, musician, indie film guy, but just tell me a little more about your life. Where do you live? That kind of thing.
All right. Well, I live in Kansas City, Missouri with my wife and, well, 3 children that are still with us. One of them's moved out. Together, we have a production company called Heaven's Wheel. We're shooting our first feature film this year, actually.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that shortly.
Yeah, so that's been pretty cool. But other than that, yeah, you mentioned a lot of the stuff that I do. You know, filmmaking and writing. I'm an award-winning screenwriter. I've started composing actually for film.
Yeah, I actually want to talk about that as well. I saw that in one of the notes about you, and I thought, oh, that's interesting because I love that as well. Yeah. But we'll jump in there, not dump in there. That's a totally different thing. We'll jump in there here shortly. Let's stick with the writing thing first of all, because you're one of the first authors, quote unquote, that I've had on the show, and I'm a big writer myself, so it's kind of fun to talk to somebody who kind of works in that realm. So let's just start by, you know, how did you get into writing? You know, did it start when you were like 5 years old, or like what happened? How did you get there, and why did you start pursuing it?
I started in childhood. But from a very young age, I really appreciated not just a good story, but the ability of anyone to be able to tell a story well. And my dad used to read Bible stories, you know, to me before before bed. And I had teachers that were great stories, kindergarten teachers in first grade. I just loved, you know, good storytelling, and I always hoped from my long as I can remember, I always hope that one day I'd be able to tell stories well. And I showed a lot of aptitude for writing, creative writing, really early on, like maybe fifth grade. You know, I started to write stories and share them with my classmates and with my teachers, and everybody was you know, I'd regale them with my tales, you know, everything. Most of them were pretty derivative of what I was either watching or reading at the time. I remember being introduced to Ray Bradbury's work really early on in a story called The Rocket that was in a kid's magazine that the teachers got for us. We got it like every week. And so I was early on as a Ray Bradbury fan. But I started writing that early. I think I wrote my first novel when I was about 10 or 11.
Oh, wow. That's really early.
Yeah, it was a time travel. There was a time travel novel that I did. And right after that, I did a story that takes place on a moon base or something like that. And I remember giving it to my dad. I taught myself to type very early on. I got my typewriter.
Pause there. Were you on an actual like typewriter? What were we?
Typewriter.
Really?
Yeah, I know.
Old school. Yeah. I mean, I remember the first computers and how clunky they were, but I only ever got to mess around on a typewriter. By then, it was already kind of moving on. But you were there. You're a real person.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you see me on my computer, you can tell I'm a typist because you hear. all the thumping on my laptop and everything. My wife can't stand it.
Awesome.
I'm a typist, yeah. So I taught myself how to type, and so I taught myself how to write and format books and everything. And I wrote a lot. I wish I had some of my old stories. I gained my dad to mail to publishing companies. I don't know if he ever actually did it, but he took them, and I never saw him again. So,
so you got a lot of good support from your parents then.
Yeah, I did. I got a lot of support. They knew I was very creative. While I was writing, I was also in music and everything. But writing continued right on to the present day. As a matter of fact, a lot of I started self-publishing about seven years ago, I think, something like that. And some of the first stories the first novels that I wrote, and some of the first screenplays that I wrote were stories that I had thought of and devised way back when I was a kid, including Momo, which we'll talk about in a little bit. That came to me when I was a kid, and I just started writing them down later in life. But I've just been an avid writer and always trying to get better,
Yeah. Well, that's part of the writing process. You never really get there. It's always just a work in progress.
Yeah. And I have more ideas than I ever be able to write in my lifetime, which is kind of depressing.
Yeah.
but I'm doing pretty good. I have a small but loyal readership, and I hope that continues to grow. This time, of course, we talked about adapting some of my stories for the screen, and vice versa, adapting some of my screenplays to novels. And so I get a lot of exercise.
Excellent. Now, as you were kind of growing up and learning the craft of writing, did you have any particular authors or storytellers out there that really inspired you, that you kind of latched onto? And who are they and why?
Definitely Ray Bradbury early on. As a matter of fact, one of the best compliments I ever got was from a teacher. I wrote something for English class, and I wrote some story for her and put my all into it. And she pulled me up the desk, and she says, "Kevin, you're a great writer, but you don't have to be Ray Bradbury, okay?" In other words, implying that I emulated Ray Bradbury in my writing. That was a great compliment to me.
Yeah. Well, I think don't you think that's a good thing though? Like, I've noticed over time, like, you start trying to adapt the tones of different writers, and it kind of helps you figure out how to kind of find your own voice in that matter. And I feel like if you're not one of those people that copies a little bit off of really good people, then you're missing out at some point. Like, that's part of the learning process.
Yeah, exactly. And so a lot of my stories, they had the Ray Bradbury vibe. A lot of my short stories were, kind of macabre and, Twilight Zone type stories, because of what Ray Bradbury again. And then later on, I started reading people like Mike Crichton.
Okay. Yeah.
Michael Crichton is a great influence. He's a wonderful writer. He and Robin Cook really helped me find my voice and the way that I write best, because they have a really good way of writing economically and writing cinematically.
Right.
And you can really visualize as a visual writer, and I've always loved the idea of movies. I never thought I'd be able to make them until digital technology made it attainable for us to do that. But I always saw my stories, like there are movies happening in my head as I was writing them. So that was a pretty cool thing. And then later in life, James Byron Huggins. I read his book Leviathan way back in the 90s. And I don't know if you know that book or not.
I do know that book.
You should look it up if you do. But if you don't, it's that is truly my favorite novel of all time. I read that and I was like, yes, it's a book that I wish I'd written, and it had me on the edge of my seat. Literally, it had me up at nights. I was as a page turner. I finished that book and I said, I got to contact this Huggins guy. And even way back then in early, in the early computer days, I guess it was, or at least as far as I'm concerned, I found his email and emailed him saying, hey, I love your book. I love this best book I ever read. Have you ever thought about, making it into a movie? And he wrote back kindly enough and said, oh, no, I really haven't, but that'd be an interesting idea, and I thought, man, but it was at that moment that the Lord said to me, and this is the Lord totally, he said, you got to turn his book into a movie. And I thought that's crazy, but it began a crusade. It was over 15-year crusade that I started to get the movie made. And I can't tell you a whole lot about what's going on now, but I formed a friendship with Mr. Huggins, and he gave me the opportunity to write the screenplay for his book Leviathan. And there are tentative plans to have that turned into a film in the next year or two, actually.
Well, that's impressive.
That's the plan. So that was pretty hard, and that whole story could actually fill a book, and I may do that one day, But yeah, so but he was another one. He's the one that really what he was writing. I said, man, I could have written this, or if I was good as him, I said, this is something that I would have written if I thought of it first. And when I talked to him subsequently, talking about turning his book into a movie and everything, we really clicked. It's like, man, it's like we had so much in common, and the way we thought and the way we wrote, and he read my work and loved what I did with his script, said it was the best adaptation of his work he's ever seen, and wants me to to make his movie someday, so it'll be up to the powers that be and who's dealing with him, but he says, if I have any say in it, man, you're going to direct this movie. So
that's awesome.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I definitely latched on to Michael Crichton early on as well. And I remember I had to kind of work it carefully because at the time I was fairly young and he had just released Jurassic Park and I really wanted to read it. And I remember my parents were very trepidatious, or they were very cautious. They did not let me just read anything I wanted, so to speak. And so they wanted to, filter everything or whatever it happened to be. And so they did let me do that. And I basically absorbed everything he wrote. I read all of it. And then I read all of it probably several more times. And so he just had a great writing style. So when you say he wrote it cinematically, I was like, yeah. And there's a reason why a lot of his movies or books have been made into movies because it reads that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, did you get, aside from these kind of mentor authors that you had, did you get any formal training ever in writing, or is it just something you just kept doing and learned on your own?
It's just something I kept doing on my own. I had a lot of natural skill, I guess. And then I would read books, lots of books on writing, the writing process and everything. I read a lot of Writer's Digest books, about writing and publishing. And then I also read about writers, and their lives and how they write and their processes sometimes whenever they care to share them. So yeah, it's that's what I do.
Yeah. Do you happen to have a particular way that you write? I know that I've read a lot about the different authors and screenwriters that I like to follow. And it's really funny to see the different ways that people write and how they go about their process. And they might have very, very unique methods that, I'm like, that would never work for me, but it seems to work for them. So how are you? Are you kind of like I wake up in the morning and just write for 4 hours without stopping? Or do you have a method to your madness?
Not really, although I am mad. But no, I sometimes it goes different ways. There are some times where I will sit down at a computer, not knowing what I'm going to write, and just start typing, and an entire book will come out in one big gush. I've written a book that I've written. There are some cases where I wrote an entire novel in a week, just writing, and without any preparation, even, or with something else in mind, and I sit down and start writing, and something else, comes out. And then there are those novels that seem to take years to write. I write little bits and pieces at a time. I'm still working on one novel that I know when it gets done, it's going to be great, but I've been working on it for years, and I'm not even halfway done with it. So it comes different ways. It comes different ways. I don't really have a method, although some would say maybe you need to get one so you're more consistent. I don't know.
Well, I think you just find what works, and once you figure that out, then that's kind of your thing.
Yeah, I write as I'm inspired to, and as now that I'm home more because COVID knocked me out of the workforce, so I'm home now more. I'm trying to become a little more disciplined in my scheduling, and everything. So I think I'm doing all right, at least as far as trying to grasp a concept. So we'll see how that goes, because I know if I allow myself, I can just write and create and just totally neglect my family if I'm not careful. So I don't want to do that.
Right.
My family's very much involved in what I do, So I'm kind of seeking the Lord. It's like, okay, well, what's the best way? Is there a schedule or a method that I should adopt to stay more regular and routine? So we'll see how that goes. But I know that it's hard for me to just make it, as soon as it becomes uninspired or not fun, I start to lose it, and my quality, diminishes and everything. So I try to keep those two things going, keep it fun and keep it inspired, and I can write, just fine.
Awesome. Well, speaking of writing a whole heck of a lot, so you have a trilogy series based on a character, and you call it Doboro. Am I saying that right? Is that
Doboro?
Doboro. There. See, I knew I was going to butcher it. I was like,
it's all right. Everybody does.
Doboro. So you have Doboro, and it's interesting as I was reading the kind of. First of all, it's a trilogy. So if the audience has never heard of this before, it's a trilogy series currently, and you have a very interesting main character. He is. He has a daughter, but then he's also, I believe, blind. And then he travels at some point over to, I believe, Japan. Is that right? He gets training there, but then he ends up coming
Korea, actually.
Korea.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I knew it was somewhere over there. So he goes and travels. He gets some formal kind of swordsmanship training, and then he comes back, and he's kind of like a protector over his daughter. And then there's other stuff that happens. So it's a really interesting idea because you kind of have a complete mixture of genres here, because he's kind of like almost like a cowboy figure, and then also I'm leaving out the fact that this character also plays guitar, which we'll get to that a little bit, because I'm sure that kind of comes from you. So it's a very interesting conglomeration of genres put together that you've developed here. So just tell me a little bit about where did this idea come from, and then like how did it become a trilogy series? Like what sparked this idea, and then obviously it's a growing story. So just kind of fill me in a little bit on it.
Okay. Doboro is inspired by a lot of things. Probably the most obvious inspiration for Doboro would be some of the old Japanese Shambara films, the samurai movies. So there's that. There's actually a blind swordsman named which is kind of Doboro's almost in a lot of ways my homage to Zatoichi, but that's where he's blind. He's trained in the Korean arts rather than Japanese arts. It's funny when you say Japanese first, because when I first wrote him, I was going to have his exile be in Japan. And because I know a lot about Japan, I know the Japanese martial arts and everything like that, being a martial artist, enthusiast myself. But then I thought, everybody goes to Japan for these types of stories, and everything. So I thought, I want to go to Korea because I don't know that much about Korea. I know it'll give me a great opportunity to study about Korea. So I moved this exile to South Korea. And, and then I started learning about some of the South Korean martial arts. I already knew about Hapkido from Billy Jack. I don't know if you know that movie or not, from the 70s. But I thought, and then I heard about the Sulsa warriors, which are almost like the Korean counterparts to the ninja of Japan, except the Korean Sulsa have honor, and they had a code. There's not so much with the ninja. And I started reading about that. I'm like, man, I've never heard about this before. And I've been studying martial arts for decades. And so I thought, let's make him a Sulsa, the last Sulsa warrior, basically. And so that's where that comes from. Doboro himself is me, basically. If I were to go through what Doboro went through, he would be me. So there's very much a lot of me in the character of Doboro. His responses are much what my responses would be. I'd be ask myself, how would I react if this happened? What would be my response if this happened? And that's what you find in Doboro. So his self-reliance is one aspect, is one major aspect of his character, but it's a self-reliance that is grounded in his faith, because he's a Christian. And that is what actually takes him through the whole rehabilitative process, and after losing everything he has, he actually comes out the other side stronger and even better than he was before, and very capable. He travels alone for the most part, even though he's visually impaired, he finds his way around. But again, the way is largely it's by the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and the Lord is actually moving him through different things, which is how he becomes kind of an avenging angel for a lot of people. But he's very much me. Even his musical leanings, he plays a cigar box guitar and everything. He's a blues singer and a player and slide guitars. That's me. Hat he wears, that's me.
Yeah.
So,
well, I find
the only thing I don't have he has is I don't have a beard. I grow it out with the ads, but
yeah. Well, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think having a character, it's hard to not put a little bit of yourself as an author into a character, and sometimes even like all the characters in a way. And so that's really interesting. Now, when you developed this, was it always planned to be a trilogy, or did you just write one and then you were like, I love this character, I want to see where it goes next, and then you continue it?
Well, this is where it's kind of strange. Doboro actually appeared in a screenplay that I wrote called Bottleneckers. It was a sci-fi story about this young teenage girl who gets involved in an interdimensional conflict between a kind of a U.S. Marshal in another dimension who's chasing this fugitive from their dimension into ours. Doboro was that kind of U.S. Marshal type character, and he recruits this young girl to help him in his search for this, this fugitive. Well, I wrote that, and the girl was actually the main character in this. Doboro was a supporting character, but I loved writing Doboro so much in that first script. I got done with it. I said, I got to give him his own adventure, and so I wrote a follow-up script called "Long Way from Paradise," which was his first adventure by himself. And I started writing it, and I said, well, by the end of the Bottleneckers, which kind of I just jettisoned that entire idea eventually. I'll tell you that in a minute. But the Long Way from Paradise, there were no sci-fi elements because they were all abandoned in the first story. He was trapped in our dimension. And so any of his gadgets and stuff that he brought with him, that they weren't work here. So there's no sci-fi. So I said, this is a straight action picture. And so I wrote Long Way from Paradise, and I loved it. And I said, man, now I got to write a story about where he comes from. So I took the character of Drew in Bottleneckers and said, okay, maybe he has a daughter and a family. And then I started coming up with the whole scenario of Doboro that now appears in the first book, Doboro the Bottlenecker. And so so I actually wrote the second book, or the script for the second book first, and then wrote the first book, Doboro the Bottlenecker. Long Way from Paradise becomes the sequel to that. And then we follow. I just said, I got to keep going with this and see where he goes,
So is there plans for more now?
Yeah, well, there's more. I'm working on number 4 now. They'll be released probably in the fall sometime.
Okay.
So that's, because the third one kind of ends up on a cliffhanger. So we got to find out where how that's all resolved. And but I have a ball writing them. People love reading them. And it's a mixed genre. I didn't know what I had at first when I wrote Doboro the Bottlenecker. I said, I don't know what I have. Let me give it to people to read and see what they think of it. And and I give it to people, be brutal. Tell me what's wrong with it. Tell me what you don't understand. And people loved it. They said, man, don't change a thing, And so Doboro has got his own audience. I'm actually thinking about doing a CD of songs inspired by Doboro here coming up maybe this year if I get the time between movies and stuff. I've written some songs already, his theme song that's featured in the book, and there's another song that's very much tied to him, and I got like four or five songs that are Doboro centered that I'm going to put on a CD along with others pretty soon here. So it's a multi-dimensional enterprise, Dobro the
Yeah.
Bottlenegger is. It's a book, it's a screenplay, it's music,
Yeah. Well, I really like like I said, it's kind of like almost like a soup, pot of genre mix, but it's interesting. It's an interesting idea. The character has a lot of depth. I like how he's already sort of, developed. And I like, I always like the hero to have very serious flaws. And so the fact that this guy can't see is very fascinating to me. So it's really interesting. I can see why you kind of latched onto it and then just kind of ran with it, because once you find a really interesting character, it's hard to not, it's hard to write one thing and then move on, and without, in the back of your mind, you're like, I kind of want to know what he would do now. So
yeah, exactly.
So that's fascinating. So moving from there, so we've got this great trilogy that you have out now, and then moving from there, let's get to Momo, which is there's a lot going on currently. But Momo, now first of all, Momo is a kind of monster type story, and I love. Like, I'm a huge fan of monsters in the woods type stories. Like, it's just something scary, something out there in the darkness, creeping around. Being, my whole life, I've been a big fan. I remember when I was younger, I read like the movie Monster by Frank Peretti, which is, again, a monster in the woods kind of an idea. And so I'm a huge fan of that kind of thing. You have a story where now you can't give away the ending on the podcast because I'm not there. I've only read like the first third or so I'm behind. I'm doing the best I can, but like I've read the beginning and I was like, okay, this has a very not dinosaur but like Jurassic Park kind of start with like an interesting scene, and now like, okay, what is happening, so just tell me a little bit, like, okay, so why did you write a monster story? Where did that come from?
Well, it comes first from my love of monsters. I loved monsters growing. I used to watch Monster Movie Matinee every Saturday. I'd look out for any monster movie that I could find. My favorites were dinosaur type monsters, Godzilla and KHU type stuff. But I also liked just the weird monsters, that didn't fit any particular category necessary. So I was always looking out for those. But I was just a big monster fan. But back in the 70s. Bigfoot was becoming a household name,
right?
And so there was a movie that came out in the early 70s called Sasquatch: The Legend of Bigfoot. It was a kind of a pseudo documentary film about Bigfoot, and I remember seeing that in the theater. That scared me to death because of the idea of these big hairy man-like hominid monsters running around the forest or mountains and stuff, and just the idea of it,
right?
It was exploded in my brain. And I remember seeing Sasquatch a little while ago, and it didn't scare me at all. I thought it was kind of silly, actually, but back then it really influenced me. So there's another movie that came out in the 50s. It's an old monster movie favorite called The Thing from Another World, and that was probably, I love that movie. That was the first movie that actually scared me, but I love the movie, and I love Sasquatch, the movie, that Sasquatch, the Bigfoot character Sasquatch, and I thought, okay. But at the same time, I knew that The Thing from Another World would be interesting, but I said, you have to care about the people, that are involved in the story first,
right?
And and I remember that from The Thing from Another World. It's like that was the one thing about the movie that filmmakers like me loved, was that they concentrated on the characters. You cared about the characters, and so you cared about what happened to them. And so later on, before I actually wrote Momo, I said, man, I came up with the idea actually when I was a kid. I said, I'd love to make a movie about a Bigfoot type character that's running around upstate New York, which is where I was from. We had a lot of hills and valleys and forests there, and I thought nothing ever happens here. Wouldn't that be pretty cool if that happened? Yeah. So flash forward decades later, I'm thinking, man, I want to write a low budget film. I thought, a monster movie. So I went to my file in my head and I said, okay, let's write a story about a Bigfoot character, a creature. And so I started researching, I thought it was going to be like a regular Sasquatch type thing. And I'd been in Kansas City for about a decade, I think. And I came across the Missouri monster, Momo. And I thought that I have studied cryptozoology all this time and I've never heard about Momo. And so I started reading about this and I became fascinated because it's a singular creature. It's not just a blanket statement for Sasquatch. Just like this is a singular creature and a singular event that happened back in the 70s, when I was living, back east. I said nothing ever happened here, but in Louisiana, Missouri, this Momo incident, there's a rash of sightings that took place over about a month, it's just a matter of weeks, in this town. Creature, and I said, man, this is pretty cool. And what was really cool about Momo wasn't that just he was a singular creature in name, he was a singular creature in his appearance, and so I thought he's not the regular Bigfoot, description. And I won't tell you what that is because I don't know if you're in there yet, but I thought this is pretty cool. And so I thought that's perfect, Momo. It's a name. It's a recognizable name, even though a lot of people here don't even know about.
Well,
Momo.
right. When I first read the name, I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it before in my life, and it wasn't until I started reading your book, and then I went and read a little bit about what I could find online where you had talked about kind of where the ideas, and then I realized that you had some articles of people talking about this, like it was an event that actually happened. I was like, what is this? How did I know? I never heard about this. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's pretty cool. It really was crazy, and I've always wanted to go to Louisiana sometime and just see how people talk about it now. They used to have a thing called Momo Days, but I don't think that they do that anymore. And I think the memory's kind of fading, although it's resurrected every once in a while by the curious reporter or something. But I said, okay, I'm gonna write the script for Momo. And so I wrote a script, and I thought looks pretty well. Actually, first what I did is I went and I watched a bunch of Bigfoot, hairy hominid, Sasquatch, Yeti movies, all that I could find, because I said, why aren't there any really good ones?
Yeah, I've wondered that as well. Actually,
there's so many of them, but I couldn't find any that were really good. So I watched as many as I could find. And I took notes about, okay, what didn't work about this film? What did work about this film? And I really just scientifically just broke it all down and everything. And I plugged everything that I learned into the script, Momo. And so I wrote it and I thought, okay, and I had to make it low budget. Couldn't be a big budget movie. It had to be really, really, really low budget because it's, I'm an independent filmmaker.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, so low budget. So I plugged everything in. And then I took that script, and I think it was like the second or third draft, I think it was. And I started sending it to contests. I thought, okay, let's see what people think of it. And it started winning awards. It won the ZedFed no low budget film screenplay contest back in 2010. And then I said, wow, so I did a little more writing on it and polishing up, and I sent it to the Kids First Film Festival. I think is that in Spain? I'm not sure where that is. Portugal, something like that. But they do an international film festival every year, and I sent the script to them for recommendation. They do recommendations, and so I sent it to them, and I got a recommendation from them. They loved it and everything, and I thought, man, this is pretty cool. And so I tried to get the movie made years ago, and I just couldn't get it off the ground. My wife suggested, why don't you just write the novel? And maybe somebody will pick it up or something, And I said, oh, okay, I can do that. So I wrote the novel and sent it out, and it got the first edition got grave reviews on Amazon. If you go to you can probably find this first edition on Amazon, and incredible reviews. People loved it. People talked about the story between the father and the son, how much it spoke to them. People talked about, they said, man, I read it. I was squirming in my seat while I was reading your book and everything, So both the screenplay and the novella got great responses and everything. So I thought, okay, well, all right, oh, great, I got something here. It's my shortest work, but it's gotten the biggest response, and so it's been pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years ago, a couple of years ago when we formed Heaven's Wheel, we talked about, okay, what films can we make? My kids were old enough where they could help and have an opinion and everything. And I was thinking about doing Doboro first, but my son had come to me and asked if I minded if he would take a shot at producing Momo. And I said, sure, let's get some young blood in behind it, And so Tyler, my son, he's my eldest son. He started, developing it and everything. And I had, went over the script with him and everything, made any revisions and everything. And then he asked me after a while if I would direct it. I thought, oh, wow, this is coming full circle, So I said, sure, I could direct it. I mean, but I asked, and then also ended up, co-starring in it with my youngest son, Tim. So it's like, oh, wow, because with the COVID and everything like that, we just thought, we don't want to, let's keep it in-house, let's keep it, among us and use the resources that we have and see what we can come up with. And so that's how the whole Momo thing came. And then we went over the script, and the script's gone through a number of rewrites, much to my chagrin.
It's going to happen.
Some of it was necessary, and I think a lot of it, was just, I was married to it because I've been so close to it, and I said, all right, I got to listen to people working with me on it because they're invested in this too. And okay, so that was painful, but we're still actually making some last minute revisions on it, but we got it pretty close to final. But we've been working on we've been in pre-production now for about 7 months, I think, and we're going to be shooting it at the beginning of April through the beginning of June.
Oh, awesome. So that's coming up right real soon, man.
Yeah.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit about as far as, getting the film made, where are you filming and how long do you think your production schedule is going to be, and like all those details? And obviously it sounds like you're keeping it fairly kind of lower budget. So, what kind of extraordinary things are you doing to make that happen? Because a monster movie, on the plus side, there have been a lot of very successful low budget monster movies before. On the downside, you really have to work at it. So just, how is that going so far?
It's been going pretty well. I'm excited and I'm encouraged. We have a lot of talent, not only with my writing ability and my filmmaking experience, with directing and stuff. But my son, Tyler, he's as talented or more talented than I am. He's a great filmmaker. I mean, he's got wonderful instincts. We share a director's eye, actually, the way we see films. And when we work together, it's like we're reading each other's minds. Or if he does something, I don't have to tell him, about how I want it. He ends up seeing it and doing it the same way. And so that's why we work really well together. But he is extraordinarily talented filmmaker. He's an award winner himself. He's won a couple of filmmaking awards himself. And, man, I wish I was as good as he was when I was his age. But he's got a great creative mind. He's a great filmmaker. So he and I are co-producing. My youngest daughter is a wonderful graphic artist. So she's doing a lot of the graphic art, and she's doing set design and wardrobe and special makeup effects. And so she's got as much of a creative mind as any of my kids do, really, and it's been fun to see them exercise these skills and these talents, that are just, man, it's like I knew they were talented, but man, I'm amazed. I'm constantly amazed at what they're able to do. So Talia, she's done some special makeup effects already on me, and I was like, man, it looks great. It looks kind of sick in some ways. So injuries.
Yeah, I'm always creeped out with makeup artists because on the one hand, you're like, man, that's amazing what you just did. On the other hand, it's horrifying.
Exactly. But she did a great job. And so she's obviously, creative. Timothy, my youngest son, who's co-starring in Momo with me, he's a great actor. He's got a lot of natural acting talent. And it's like, we've done some short films just to warm up to this point. And it's like, man, he's got a lot of talent. And he's got a good head on his shoulders with our innovation here and everything, Okay, and and we'll go through and he'll suggest corrections because that doesn't make quite much sense here. Can we change it to this? And I've learned to listen to it. That's probably been my biggest exercise is listen to the other people about about my own work, with different viewpoints, and taking their suggestions and stuff seriously. So so Tim's very talented, and he's also working in other departments with lighting and that kind of stuff. And they're all learning new skills. Tamara, my eldest daughter, she's our drama coach. She's participated in drama. She's a good little actress herself. She actually starred in a horror short we did for a contest last year called No Candy, and she did a great job. But she's a great actress. So she's our drama coach, and she's also going to be my advisor when we're on the set, because I'm directing myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's going to be there to kind of let me know, hey, you're not quite cutting it and everything. She'll be my eyes. She'll be my eyes when I'm acting.
Excellent.
So she's there. And my wife she's got her own, she's the production supervisor. And so she's got a lot of stuff that she helps.
I mean, you've roped in the whole family is involved with this endeavor. Yeah, it's going to be everybody great. All in here.
I've always wanted, so it's great.
Yeah. Now, if everything goes according to plan, you get it filmed in April, May, June, that whole area. How long do you think your post will be? Like, when are we, going to get the first hint at seeing this thing?
I'm thinking we should be able to have something by, let's see, if we finish in June, I'm thinking we should have something by year's end. I'm not sure if it'll be the complete film, but it'll definitely be a good taste of what we've done, show people what we've done. But we're still deciding now what we're going to do as far as distribution, whether we're going to go to an online platform or whatever. I know I've spoken to some, particularly PureFlex, who is very interested in what we're doing. He says, man, that's what we're looking for, people thinking outside the box. So he said, when you get it done, please consider us for it. So they're already on board. There are other platforms out there. I've talked to some representatives from them that it's like, man, that's the thing. It's not something that's been done in Christian films much, outside, the usual, wafer thin genres, that a lot of Christian film ventures into. This is a creature feature, and it's meant to be a hard, kind of a real suspenseful, scary movie. That's what I want. I want a real good and scary monster movie, but one that has a definite, Christian worldview and inspirational, vibe to it,
Yeah. So, well, I think for a long time, the Christian industry has talked about wanting shows like this. And at the same time, I think for a long, they've kind of pulled away from it for the most part, because it's not a safe genre, precisely because it's scary and you have monsters and you have these different elements. And so the good news is I would say now, I think more and more of the streaming services are becoming more and more open to this kind of thing, and realizing like, hey, there's ways that we can do this that we might still be able to hit, like you said, a PureFlix audience. And I think that's a great thing, because obviously these movies do extremely well. Every time I go to Redbox, like it seems like 2/3 of the movies on there are horror and scary movie genre. And the Christian presence in that has been minimal, almost nothing. And I used to wonder why, but over time, as I've kind of learned the industry more and more, I understand what's going on. It's kind of a shame. So I'm excited to see what you do with it, and obviously, I hope that it does really well. I think in that genre, as long as you do a couple things right, it usually goes pretty good, because people give a lot of rope for that genre. So that's awesome.
You're right. Thank you.
Now, we don't have a whole lot more time, but I have a few more things I want to talk about with you, because we kind of skimmed it already, but we're skipping over an interesting development, which is, you're a musician. So I believe you play guitar, and you must play it pretty well. And music seems to be a dominant thread in everything that you do, in both in the stories that you're writing. And not to, toot your horn or anything like that, but you also founded the KC Cigar Box Guitar Festival yourself. So I just kind of want to know, like, where did the music come into all this, and like, where did the festival come out? Like, what, as if you didn't have enough going on, now you're doing this. So what's up with that?
Yeah, it's another long story. Although the festival has kind of been defunct. I ran it for, I think, 3 years. And then I gave it to a friend of mine who said, I'll take it and I'll continue it. Because I felt the Lord was telling me to stop, And then she did it for 1 year and then dropped it. So she abandoned my baby, and never got revived. But anyway, that started out. The whole music has always been a part of my life. I've been a guitarist since I was 13 years old, and but I've always I love the slide guitar. Anyway, I've always loved the sound. I just didn't know how to get it, and it wasn't until much later, like in my 20s, that I finally saw somebody actually play. I think I saw Bonnie Raitt on a VH1 on a concert, and I heard her. I was like, "That's it! That's slide guitar. That's all I do." I got in front of the TV and was like, "Wow, that's it!" I ran out immediately and got a guitar slide and started to learn how to play it, and got really good at it. Got pretty good slide guitars, and I suffered from insomnia for most of my life, and so my fine motor skills weren't good enough for me to become a really good lead guitarist. My fingers were just, I couldn't do it, and so I thought, well, let me learn how to play slide guitar really well, and that'll be a neat compensation for that, and I did. The cigar box guitar came a little bit later when I couldn't get the sound that I wanted out of the guitars that I have. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll try to build my own guitar if I find a luthier or something to do that. And of course, put it in building guitars. I find cigar box guitar, and I'm like, well, that sounds cute, So let me see what that is, And I thought I was thinking about, like, when I was a kid, I'd take a shoebox, my guitar. So I clicked on a cigar box guitar, and it's like, oh, that's me. This is cute, I said, I'm gonna go make one just to see what turns out. And so I built one. I just, I went out and I actually didn't use a cigar box. I used a silverware box. It was bigger. I thought it'd get a bigger sound. But I got a cigar box and a little plank of wood and eye bolts for the tuners and guitar strings. And I went to set the work on my creature in the basement, and I built it. And I didn't tell anybody I told my family what I was doing, but they didn't know what I was doing. And so
I thought you were just building a monster down there.
Yeah. I did. I built it in secret, and I brought out the family room downstairs, and I started playing it. And they come running downstairs. My kids, I come and say, "Oh, wow, we want one," Everything. But that started my whole journey with cigar box guitars, because that sound that I found was the sound that I was looking for perfectly. And I said, so I abandoned my 6-string guitars and I started playing 3-string cigar box guitars and diddly bows and 2-stringers. And I started building my guitars. And there's addicting to build as they are to play.
I can believe that.
And I just never went back. Each one has its own sound and personality. And so they're amazing. And so that's where the whole cigar box guitar thing turned on. I started doing concerts and stuff. And I wanted to share my discovery with other people. So I formed the Cigar Box Guitar Festival, and it was a great people came from all over, different states, and and it was a really, people rise thanking me for doing it, because they finally had a way to express themselves musically that was affordable, because they're pretty much one man's junk is another man's musical instrument, and it was great. It's I miss doing it. Sometimes I want to go back and hear it. But
that's awesome.
I love playing, and it's been part of my music, repertoire, and an integral part of my composing, and it's been great.
Yeah. Well, I just find it funny. There's a lot of filmmakers that end up also being musicians. I'm the same way. I play guitar and have been doing that for a long, long time. And it is funny how the music kind of bleeds into the movies, and then the movies turn around and bleed back into the music, and it just kind of happens that way. It's unique, and I think it's all just you're still the music is part of the story, and it just kind of fits in there. And anyway, and I wish I had more time to make cool instruments. I don't. I've made a few medium grade tables, and I would like to do that more and more, but I don't have the space, to actually build stuff. My garage is full of junk at the moment. So
I hear you.
Oh well, that's how it goes, right?
That's how it goes. Yeah.
Well, as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to ask, I'm sure that I'll have other, writers, authors of all various stages at some point or another listen to this podcast. And I thought, as a writer who's been doing so much successfully and so many different, like you've written screenplays and the novel formats and things like that, I was curious, what advice would you have for, writers in general? And, what kinds of things have you learned over time that you think are really valuable?
I would say, don't be afraid to learn to be better. That's really important. Well, I think even before that, know that you can write first. Not everybody can write. Not everybody who wants to write can write well. And if you're brave enough to, try your hand at it, I say, go ahead and try to write. Do what you can to get your ideas out, but then take them to somebody who will be honest with you about, whether or not you have talent, any type of talent, and then go from there. But don't, not everybody, that's the thing. And it's hard to say because you want to say, follow your dreams and like that. But not everybody can write. It's just like I'm awful when it comes to, math, for example. Not that I can't do math, but I hate it. Right. And my brain starts to go into knots when I go into complex mathematic, formulas and stuff, And some people love it and can do it, they love it and they're natural at it. Me, not me, So I recognize and I can accept that. So if somebody can be honest with themselves and find out if they have talent, and then if they do, then follow that, get better at it, find out what you need to become a great writer. Find writers that you love and read their work, read it again, find out what it is about their work that makes you love their work. I've read some books a number of times just to find out what it is. Okay, why did I like this? What was it, that about their writing that maybe like it? And I, start writing down in detail what it was, or at least assimilating it in my own consciousness, what made this story so wonderful, how they wrote it and everything. There's that. I would say write something that you can complete your first time out. Even write a short story. Try a short story first. Don't tackle a subject that's going to doom you to failure your first time out. I think a lot of people get the idea, I want to write this novel, or I want to write my life story, but they have no idea the kind of work that it takes. They have no idea what it takes to start. Yeah. And so that's really important. And they can end up defeating yourself and failing before you even get halfway through it. Yeah. And so those are probably the two biggest pieces of advice that I would have for writers.
Awesome. I think you're spot on, dead on. In fact, I remember some of the best advice that I got learning early on was just start writing and finish the story. And they were like, just finish. They were like, you won't believe how many people will start, but just don't finish. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Yeah. It's so easy to finish. It's not easy to finish. No. And even when you finish like a first draft of something and it's all the way done, like, I'm like, man, celebrate. Cause you just at least finished. Yes. And now you can go work at it again. But finishing is like, that is the thing. If you're a finisher, then you can make it in the writing world. If you start and you're like, I want to write the next, epic Michael Crichton style genre, but good luck to you if you can't finish. I'm like, can you just get to the end? If you can do that, you've already beat 99% of the people out there. So
exactly,
that is awesome. Well, Kevin, it's been an awesome pleasure having you on the show and just fun hearing about your stories. I look forward to seeing what happens here with Momo, and definitely going to follow up with you here, in the next few months as it's developing and all that kind of stuff. But thank you for being on here, and we'll definitely talk more. Maybe we'll get your son. Heck, we might get your whole family on here is what it sounds like. Cool. Eventually talk about how production went, because that's definitely going to be an interesting thing. So
yeah, that'd be great.
All right, man. Well, thanks again. Let's wrap it up. This has been the Chason Laing podcast. You're going to find all the relevant links from today's show in the show notes, including all of Kevin's links. So please check him out. Check out his website. Check out Doboro, the whole trilogy. It's all on there. All the links. You can get it on Amazon. It's great. So check that out. If you enjoyed the show, please hit the subscribe button, and we will be posting here pretty have you ever had a moment when you had a sentence and it just left you because it's at the end of the day?
All the time.
It always happens at the end. It always I'm gonna finish this show somehow, and then whatever. If you have any questions, anybody, for me or for Kevin here, please leave it in the comments. We will definitely get back to you. That is all for this show. Let's end it before I make another mistake. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Justin.